Welcome. My name is Sandhya Simhan. I'm the Director of Marketing here at DeepLearning.AI. Welcome to AI plus X, Don't Switch Careers at AI. This is a special event presented to you by DeepLearning.AI and our sister company, Workera. AI is forecasted to have trillions of dollars in annual business impact. As companies invest millions in hiring and training AI professionals, those who bolster their domain expertise with AI fundamentals will have an inherent career advantage. What exactly is the emerging career of AI plus X? Why is it worth pursuing? And how do we get there? To answer these questions, we've assembled a panel of AI leaders today to share their visions on a truly AI plus X company, as well as provide guidance on how technical and non-technical professionals can build a dual competency career. You can find the list of topics we'll be covering if you scroll down to check the event description. Afterwards, we'll be taking questions from the community via Slido. If you have signed up for the Slido ticket, check your email for the access link to post and upvote questions there. Now, without further ado, I'd love to welcome Kian Katanforoosh, founder and CEO of Workera, to help us dive deeper into AI plus X. Welcome, Kian.
Hi, everyone. Excited about this and thank you, Sandhya. I'm going to share my screen to introduce everyone to AI plus X. So as Sandhya said, I'm Kian Katanforoosh. I'm the CEO of Workera and the lecturer of computer science at Stanford University, where I teach the deep learning classes. In this short presentation, I will introduce you to AI plus X. And I'd like to start by recalling that there are record levels of investments and anxiety in developing data and AI skills. Companies today, are spending a lot of money to train their workforce. Global spending on AI specifically is expected to double over the next 4 years, to grow to $110 billion in 2024, according to IDC. The skills shortage in AI is cited by CIOs as the single most significant challenge for their organization, according to Gartner. And 79% of CEOs are concerned that a lack of essential workforce skills is a threat to the future growth of their organization. And so this leads companies to think deeply, and even more deeply than before, on how to structure and grow successful AI organizations. And this is happening in all sectors. The 2019 AI survey globally from McKinsey shows an increase in AI adoption in nearly every industry, although certain industries like retail, tech, telco, and automotive are leading the way. Through Workera and DeepLearning.AI, I've had the chance and been fortunate to meet and work with AI leaders from large organizations in multiple industries. And I learned that most companies look for individuals with dual competencies. For example, Toyota and Hyundai are looking for people with AI and polymer electrolyte membrane expertise to build fuel cells that back up data centers, that back up power laptops, chargers, and wearables. Biotech companies like Illumina, and I think Amirali will touch upon that, seek talent with AI and DNA sequencing expertise to develop novel algorithms for genome interpretation and unlock new treatments and medicine. Medical device manufacturers like Medtronic seek employees who have a combination of AI and robotics expertise to create new types of surgical procedures. And even agricultural giants like John Deere wants applicants with AI and agricultural or agronomic expertise to help farmers customize and automate how they manage their field operations. And you can see examples of job titles who are up right now on the market. This is a unique phenomenon in AI, and because AI projects are centered around data, which varies significantly from industry to industry, the subject matter expertise piece is critical. Take a front-end engineer that is very talented, and they will be able to build elegant visual interfaces for industries like music, applications in logistics or bioscience. But a data scientist without domain expertise is likely to struggle to successfully complete projects across all those industries. And in other words, we could say that AI without subject matter expertise is like electricity without a light bulb. And so companies need individuals with these dual competencies, AI and subject matter expertise. So we'll refer to those as AI plus X individuals, where X stands for subject matter expertise. AI plus X individuals can hit the ground running, enabling companies to tackle new business opportunities more rapidly. And you can think about it this way. Training a biotech engineer in AI could take several months, but training an AI practitioner to understand biotechnologies deeply could take years before meaningful output. So a subject matter expertise in that sense, who comes with or is able to develop new capabilities in AI, is an incredible investment for companies. Andrew and I at Stanford have already seen this desire for obtaining an AI toolbox to complement existing knowledge. And in our deep learning class, CS230, students learn both about the theory and also apply their deep learning knowledge to projects while being mentored by industry leaders and teaching staff members. 2/3 of those students are not from the computer science department. They're from everything from chemical engineering to mechanical engineering to astrophysics to business and law. And in fact, these non-CS students perform oftentimes at par and sometimes even better than those pursuing a computer science degree. Many of them win project awards and take their projects and publish their results in leading industry journals. And you know what our teaching staff really understood is and tried to understand is why are non-CS students so effective at delivering high-quality AI projects. And we realized that domain expertise can help at literally every stage of the AI project development lifecycle, presented in Workera's AI Career Pathway report. So let's look at a few examples together. Let's start with data engineering. Pre-processing a data set for a musical application requires an understanding of encoding types and musical notation. Here you have an example of a sample encoding which combines pitch, volume, and instruments. And the author of this project, Christine Payne, is actually a trained pianist on top of being an AI practitioner. This is knowledge that takes years to acquire. An example of modeling tasks that requires subject matter expertise would be performing error analysis on a chest X-ray for a pneumonia detector. This requires heavy domain expertise. And the first author of this paper, Pranav Rajpurkar, is an AI plus healthcare expert and has worked with many radiologists over the years to understand their thought process and the decision making. As you know, machine learning does not operate in a vacuum. Deploying an intelligent robotic arm in a factory requires knowledge of the environment. What's the pace of the manufacturing line or the workflow inside the factory? What's the type of object that the robot would need to grab? Where do we position the robot in the factory? Would a suction head or a gripper be more effective for the robot to move objects? And how often should we carry out maintenance on such a robot? Finally, to picture how domain expertise impacts business analysis, imagine analyzing the results of an A/B test for a marketing campaign. It requires understanding a load of marketing metrics such as CTR, NQLs, CAC, LTV, and so on. And you can even imagine if you were to evaluate the performance of a text-to-speech synthesizer from English to Hindi without speaking Hindi. It's very complicated. So in that note, I hope the introduction on AI plus X was helpful. I'm very excited to talk about AI career trends and AI plus X with incredible leaders like Fernando, Valerie, and Amirali. Thank you for your attention, everyone.
Thank you, Kian, for that wonderful speech. I really love how your microcosm of your class at Stanford really reinforces that an individual with that interdisciplinary background can really be more creative in really unexpected ways. So thank you for sharing that. Really awesome. So now let's welcome the other panelists to join us for the discussion. They are Fernando Lucini, Global Lead for Data Science and Machine Learning Engineering at Accenture Applied Intelligence. Valerie Alleger, Director of Data and Analytics Strategy, EMEA at the Janssen Pharmaceutical Companies of Johnson & Johnson, and Amirali, Director of AI and Computational Biology at Illumina. So for the next 50 minutes or so, I'll be asking some questions to our panelists. While I'll direct questions to a specific person, I'd love to encourage all of you to jump in on and offer your input on any of the questions that you're interested in. So let's start off with a brief introduction from everyone. Fernando.
Hi, everybody. Lovely to be here. You've already done a bit of an introduction, but I'm Fernando Lucini. I'm the Chief Data Scientist of Accenture. So my role is to hopefully in this particular setting, tell you about what we do to serve our customers, maybe different to maybe being a customer. So what does it take for you to be an AI plus X in the world of consulting, serving customers every day and doing interesting things with data and AI?
Awesome. And Valerie?
Sure. So as you said, Sandhya, I'm currently the director of data analytics strategy at Janssen EMEA. And before that, I held several roles at another pharma company, spanning from commercial, so marketing and sales functions, all the way to descriptive analytics, and I also trained myself in data science a few years ago. So maybe as a disclaimer, my area of expertise is mostly into marketing analytics, which is for me the science of producing insights and recommendations to make data-driven decisions for commercial purpose.
Totally. You're impacting business strategy from the ground up. Amirali?
Hi, everyone. This is a pleasure to be here. Amirali, Director of Computational Biology and AI at Illumina. A quick note that I wanted to mention that resonates with this area is that my background is also mechanical engineering, not necessarily computer science or data science. So I came from that path and then joined Illumina, doing data science and eventually expanding that to applying AI to different aspects of technology at Illumina. So it has been a very wonderful path, and I hope that I can share some of my experience here with the rest of the people.
Awesome. Thank you all so very much for being here. So to kick us off, I'm going to put out a potentially controversial statement. So we have a thesis that, if AI is the new electricity, that electricity without a light bulb is a bit useless. And I'd love to hear from you guys about whether you agree or disagree with that. Amir?
Sure. So there are two aspects to this that I want to mention. One is, how do you look at AI? Like, do you look at AI as a tool, and then you want to force it to solve a problem that sometimes there is non-existing problem, or it's an overkill tool to solve a certain problem? That's one way of looking at it. And if we look at it that way, I would always suggest that, no, you have to go back the other way. You have to find the problem and find the right tool. And AI, in many cases, could be the right tool for solving that problem. The other way of looking at it is the way that I was having a brief discussion before this meeting with Kian, that does AI without subject expertise matter can solve the problems? Ideally, yes. So with the new AI techniques that you can go end to end, you can get the raw data, and if you have the right labels, you can train a model and everything works fine. But the truth is that if the problem is that clean that you can ideally apply it, usually you don't need to apply AI, you already know the answer. So in practice, what happens is that you get into so many problems in terms of noise, other things that can happen, problems that can happen, and immediately you have to have the right understanding of the problem that you're dealing with. And it brings the fact that if you don't have the subject expertise or the right input for the subject expertise, you will have a hard time solving the problem.
Makes total sense. Valerie?
Sure. So, I mean, in my view, first of all, I agree. Also coming from my background, I guess from a life science engineer background, and having trained further along the way on data science, I cannot agree more that we need both, let's say, right, to make it really relevant for the organization in general. But what I can say maybe on this is that beyond the hype on AI, I mean, we hear a lot of buzzwords. Maybe I can tease Fernando a little bit on this because we have a lot of consultants trying to sell us, let's say, a lot of hype. Maybe not Fernando, I imagine, of course, but in general, it's what I can say, what I have seen, in the past is that it's not necessarily connected to actual business questions, right? And very often we hear about AI use cases, but we don't know exactly if they are, solving the main business problem, right? I think what's critical here is really not to jump when we have a business question, is not to jump immediately on, using a machine learning technique, for example, is rather to do some descriptive analytics first, to look at KPIs and all that, and to have, as Kian said before, to really look at what would be the best technique to be used to solve the question.
Awesome. Fernando, would you like to add to that?
I don't mind being teased. It's okay. We have a very healthy debate about this in the firm, because as you can imagine, there's many of us. But here's the two sides. So you can, and I always joke, it's like Duran, like when two tribes go to war. On one side, we have the super expert. These are the AI plus X, right? These are folks that have PhDs in mechanical engineering and are data scientists and are working in a gas and oil company trying to figure something out. And on the other hand, what we have is the super AI experts. So people that have been peers of Kian, professors of AI, who think that if you look at a problem as first principles, you may not use AI, but it helps you think of the problems and remove them as first principles and go back to the bottom of the problem, and figure out. And we have a funny example that we use to demonstrate this, which is the old paradigm. If you have let's say a turbine, and the turbine is leaking. And in the morning, every morning, somebody comes in and cleans the leak, right? In the meantime, all this telemetry is going out of the machine, and a clever person that understands the machine and knows thermodynamics and all these things, and is thinking, well, I don't understand it. And the person with the first principles comes and says, if you think a little bit outside the box, you'll think that somebody's wiping the oil at the beginning of the day, filling the machine back up, and we don't know why it's wearing down to destruction during the day. And we use that example to try and figure out, if you are the super expert and you're just thinking about how the machine works mechanically, would you miss that because you're not thinking a little bit further out? And would the generalists come in? Nobody's won this debate. So Kian and I have this debate as well. I'm on the side of the experts. Very rarely do you go to the CEO of a bank or the CEO of your company and you say, I'm going to go and hire a data scientist that knows nothing about our business. And it doesn't pass the common sense sort of test, right? So that I think that works for me. And I play with the story of the turbine and the leaking all day to test this theory with people, and I guess say 50-50.
Fair enough. So all of you work at places that really have embraced the use of both domain experts and AI experts really working in concert. I'd love to hear about how domain expertise drives AI usage in your respective roles. Shall we start with Valerie this time?
Yes, of course. So yeah, maybe building on what we said before. I mean, the way I see it is that it's more of a composite role, right? As we said, AI plus X, I mean, by definition, but it's also about a composite and a complementary team. I don't think one single individual can do these, whatever we call it, however we call it, analytics translation or even AI plus X, we can call it, different ways. But I don't think it's very easy to do it with one single individual in any way, in any case. So I think, it's more about finding the best combination of people within the team who can bring both things. I mean, the subject, including, AI, machine learning techniques, but also statistics and as let's say for me, the skill set of the data scientist alone, without even thinking about subject matter expertise, is already quite broad. And without even talking about, subject matter expertise. So now when you add in subject matter expertise, it becomes really not difficult, but it becomes really, you need to think how you compose that team per se, so that you can really deliver value to the company. That's how I see it.
Makes sense. Amirali?
Sure. Let me give you one example or a couple of examples at how subject expert matter can play a role here. In genomics, you draw blood from a patient, and that's the starting point, right? And then what else? If you're a data scientist, do you know what sort of information you can extract from that blood that you drew from a patient? If you're a pure data scientist, you're clueless. You don't know what can be done with that, right? So that's how the subject expert matter comes in place and can identify what you can do. And now trying to look at it in a more abstract way, to be able to do AI, you need, first of all, you need data. If you don't have data, AI doesn't really mean anything. And when it comes to data, the subject expertise help you first know how to generate data, right? And then the second thing is that how to extract information from that data. The third thing is that what is orthogonal information that you can access. If you don't have subject expertise, you don't understand what orthogonal information you can add or what redundant information you have in the data that you have. And we all know that redundant information can quickly put you in a bad situation in terms of the modeling that you're doing. Then the next level comes, which is application. Okay, I have my data, I have my model. What sort of applications can I do? And what are the specifications of those applications? What are the characteristics of those applications? One of the better applications that is around is, for example, translation, right? For using AI is very, very powerful in translation. We have apps in almost all mobile phones that does a translation. If it makes a mistake, is it a matter of life and death? Not really, right? Nobody relies on that translator to do their like day in, day out job. But what if you want to report a test on a certain patient? What happens then if you make a mistake? So what is the level of accuracy? What is the level of reliability that you want in the application that you want to put out there, combining the data that you have and the model that you have? And then the third layer comes, which are the expectations. In many cases, for example, if you're reporting something, you have to be able to trace it back. You have to be able to explain it. In some other cases, there is no need to be able to explain that. And all of that comes out of subject matter expertise. How you do it comes from a data science expertise, but what you need comes from subject matter expertise.
No, really, really well said. Fernando.
I have a more pedestrian view. Ami is way much more advanced than I am. My simplicity in this is as you'll see, it's a question of density. So if the density of the problem is in the let's say in genomics, for example, then you'll have to balance that way. If the density is the problem is in let's say the mechanics of the science, right, the data science, then you have to go the other way. I'll give you a good example. Can
you explain a little bit what you mean about density?
I'll give you an example. We'll become clear. So if you go to any of our customers, normally you go into a supply chain in a gas and oil company, there's no chance you walk in there and understand a conversation. If you've never heard it before, you will walk in and they'll be speaking, they might as well speak in Japanese or Spanish, and you're not a speaker. You won't even know what you're doing in the first. So that's super dense. It's a very dense space, right? In terms of knowledge, right? So then within that, you have somebody who actually understands how you deal with wear and tear in a turbine. So you have context within context. It becomes more and more dense. For that, we need the super expert in the topic. And to be honest, a data scientist can come in and help, and they can work side by side, and you can try and make that work. But in some cases, you can lose so much time to explain that if you have somebody who understands the both topics to a certain degree, that's great. If the density is on the other side, so if you're creating a synthetic data set using variational autoencoders, and you spend your life studying physics and the physics of a turbine, it's unlikely you've sat there and really understand really deeply how a variational autoencoder works. It's very dense on the data science side. So at that point, the pairing becomes very, very good. And I have a philosophy, again, you guys can disagree with me, which is the whole point of AI is to do more with less. To do much more with less, right? With less of everything. Less human. You don't need thousands of data scientists to solve problems. As a matter of fact, you need very few to do very, very spectacular things, right? So the pairing is fine. And it depends on that, whether a topic is super dense that the barrier to entry to understand it and create an algorithm is just beyond you, or the science that you're trying to apply is beyond that expert, at which point you start pairing and you get the best of both worlds. And there's a balance in between where you can get it, you can make it work. Notwithstanding what my colleagues have said, which is totally correct as well, right?
Oh, that's really interesting. It's almost like, shall we say, if we treat density as really like a language comprehension, like you might speak marketing, you might speak AI, you need people who are relatively fluent, conversationally fluent in the other to be able to have that true pairing of expertise. Really interesting. Now, I guess we've talked a lot about like how this can be applied. Where do we find these magical unicorns? Where do we find these candidates with dual competencies? And do you see a lack of that talent in your current markets? Fernando, we'll start with you.
So this is a source of constant conversation between Kian and I. As a matter of fact, that's where we use Workera to help us out together. I think in the next 2 or 3 years, this is going to be more and more difficult. And a very nice professor in the UK said to me, it's all about unicorn farming, no unicorn hunting, right? Mm. So for a company like ours, which employs, there's 500,000 of us, 550,000, but where we're looking for, we have a massive scale. We also have the ability to create a lot of these careers. So for us, it's about creating those careers. So it's about bringing in experts, say my example with somebody who's done mechanical engineering PhD, and actually giving them the opportunity to create a career through assessments, through benchmarking, through training, through application in their customers, to create these unicorns, if you will. Because my view is that whilst the knowledge of AI is going to be more easily accessible to everybody, thanks to Kian and Andrew and yourselves in deep learning and others, that raises the water level for all, but it doesn't necessarily raise the depth for all, right? So I need a bit of both. I need the PhD in mechanical engineering or whatever, and I need them to be super deep. So the only way for me to get there, I think, is to create a career that allows them to get there.
I really like the phrase unicorn farming. That makes a ton of sense. Amir.
Sure. I agree with Fernando a lot on this, and I really like the way that he mentioned the density in the answer to the previous question. That actually relates to this one as well. In a way, I think that things are getting a little better because many of people who are finishing up in different degrees, they go into places like Workera, DeepLearning.AI, inside data sciences, other places, and they try to train and add a layer of data science to their work, and they're sort of training themselves. But for a company who's going to hire them, you have to look at the situation. In many cases, common sense can play a huge role. You're playing with the data that common sense can take care of majority of the work for you. In some cases, the expertise is the thing that you need, so there is no other way around it. And we had a philosophy at Illumina, and I was trying to follow a philosophy that, should I go with a person who knows biology and teach them AI, or should I go with a person who knows AI and teach them biology? In case I cannot find the person who knows both of them, right? And ideally, you want to find a person who knows both of them. I think in the later questions, we're going to touch upon this, and I'm not going to get into this more, but my understanding is that hunting for these people is getting easier just because the trend, because people are trying to learn data science as part of their program. Like it's a matter of taking a few courses, it's a matter of adding a quick program at the end of your PhD or whatever other degree that you have, or while you're at work, join one of these programs. So the future looks bright on this end.
Makes sense. Valerie, anything else to add?
Yeah. to find, you know, these unicorns that we've talked about, especially in Europe. I think it's even more difficult. And if you reduce it even further to the pharmaceutical domain and into a pharma commercial, it's even harder. So yes, I mean, definitely it is difficult, and it's even a small community of people in Europe. You know, I'm also involved in PMSA, which is the Pharma Management Science Association, which is an American nonprofit organization actually for sharing insights, best practices on insights and data science for commercial in pharma. And I'm the European lead for this. So in Europe, I can say we're just starting. It's a very small community. So I wouldn't say that we all know each other, but a lot of people know each other in this area. I am, you know, personally quite extreme in the way I look for these profiles, because I go massively technical in a sense, meaning that I really like to have, it's always a combination, as I said, so not everyone the same, but some people in the team, for me, must have been doing, you know, have been a data scientist in the past and doing really hands-on, you know, playing with data, cleaning the data, not saying that they must be, you know, deep learning experts, but at least they should have not also they should have got their hands dirty, you know, with preparing data and things like that at some point, right? So, and I think this is an essential part of a team for me, to have people like that. So that's kind of the AI plus X technical, you know, a bit more technical people, right? Mm-hmm. And then why am I thinking this way? Is because I have observed in the past, in my previous company, I have observed that even at a leadership level, at a people who were having this, you know, technical background in both topics, leading data science teams, as well as commercial data science teams, let's say, it started to change, right? It started to really take off. And we started to really build a roadmap and, you know, and deliver value. So that's why I am biased, and that's why I go quite technical. I need to explain that to my colleagues, because some people don't understand why, you know, this is needed in the combination, but I truly believe this is a key success factor.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. So Kian, we haven't heard from you in a little bit, but I think it's really clear that employees with AI skills are in really high demand and provide great value. Can you tell us more about why a career shift like this is really like useful to someone who's already pretty successful as a subject matter expert? Like, how is it beneficial to them?
Well, I think it's all about making people more productive and better at their job, and you know, I think AI and data skills are making their way to nearly every job category. The easiest analogy that I can think of is programming skills. Today, you'll find so many mechanical engineers that code, so many you know, material scientists, aeronautics engineer, chemical engineer that code, and that was not the case a long time ago. And the reason they learned how to code is because it makes them much more productive and better at their job. And so similarly, I think the ability to work with data and models will make those job categories much more productive. And besides, oftentimes these subject matter experts have the strong scientific and engineering foundations to pick up data and AI fairly quickly. This would include linear algebra, functional analysis, calculus, probabilities and statistics, data structures and algorithms that are very useful when picking up AI skills. And I agree with what Fernando and Amirali said regarding it. It really depends on the density of how much you need to be technical in AI. But I think in a few years from now, everybody would benefit from having foundational AI skills to become more productive on their job.
No, that makes a ton of sense. I'd actually take your statement and go one step further. My background's actually in psychology. And at first glance, you think social science has absolutely no need, but there's a ton of research that's done in psychology that requires quantitative analysis. And so freshmen at my alma mater are now encouraged to take Python courses because they, it either helps you when you hit industry or it helps you if you're pursuing higher academia. So I'm really glad to see that there's that sort of understanding of, programming has sort of become a base skill. But I love what you're saying, that AI is going to become one of those base skills that everyone needs as well. So I'm gonna spin a question to all of you now. So there are a lot of audience members in our chat today who may be in HR or learning and development or part of a data AI academy within an organization. What advice do you have for them on how to bring AI plus X to their organization at scale? Can we start, maybe Amirali, could we start with you?
Sure. Actually, for this question, I had taken a lot of notes, like details on what to share, because it's such a broad topic. But I just think that there is one important factor that we benefited at Illumina. I've seen this in other places, which is bringing the fundamental understanding of how AI works to almost everyone. Not only to people who are quote unquote data scientists and AI team, but also bring that understanding to people who are, in case of Illumina and other genomics companies, or working in the lab. And then even more importantly, bring that understanding to the higher up management. And what is that level of understanding? That level of understanding is that what can be done with what, right? So if you know that level, then doors starts to open. If a person who is working in the lab, they know that, oh, if I can collect this type of data, maybe I can do something with it. And then take that and share it with a data scientist that, by the way, I can collect this type of data. Do you think you can do something with it? That is the start of something great in a company. And if that person in the lab doesn't know this,
sorry, we're getting a little bit of an echo.
They would generate that data, but it would never go anywhere, or they would never even think of generating that data. And now it is even more important on the management level, because if a company wants to include AI plus X, which is a very, very important factor. If you're a scientist deep down in a company, yes, you can do AI plus X, you can do something little here, something little there. But in a more grand scheme of things, you want something happen at the company level. And for that, the management should get engaged. The management should provide you with the tools that you need. And the management should have that understanding that, oh, I can go in this direction. I can collect this type of data. I can collect that type of data. I can invest in this. And then good things happens. So if HR can initiate that sort of training, which is not deep training, it is just conveying the basic fundamentals of how AI can benefit. I think that goes a long way for any company.
Awesome. Fernando.
I'm going to follow in my line of giving you pedestrian views. We create immense amounts of factories within Accenture, so we have a lot of experience. But the way I would simplify it is create careers. If you're in HR, everybody's hungry for a career. So create careers, and to do that, think about if you think about the professionalization of AI, another one of Kian and Fernando's favorite topics, the professionalization of this space. And I don't mean everybody has to be certified by the government. I think no. If you think about the way software worked, it's entirely professionalized, but there's no certification to professionalize it. It's not like being a doctor or being an engineer or an architect, but it's totally professionalized. Yeah, I always joke, you put five software engineers in a room for 5 hours, and you open the door after 5 hours, and they're self-organized, there's source control, everything is compiled the right way. They haven't written any code, but they've done all that, right? AI needs to go through the same kind of process. And if you're in HR and you want to create AI plus X, create the careers so people know what they have to do. They have learning available. I have a theory that assessment and benchmarking is going to be the new currency to make sure value is clear and understood. Because again, this AI is not one thing, as we all know. The science of it is endless, right? And it'll continue to be endless. So you have to start making it very clear what success looks like. So create a career, make it very clear what success looks like. And people want to join great companies to have a career. So make it easy for them to know that there is a career path called AI plus X, or just AI, up to you. Then make sure that you come in with a skill and you progress along in time, creating another set of wonderful skills, right? And test it. Give them the ability to be clear of what it is they know and don't know. Don't leave it to the wind, right? That'd be my 2 cents.
No, that makes a lot of sense. At Deep Learning AI, we spend a lot of time thinking about how are we creating equitable access to world-class education. And I think what you're saying is it's not just the education part that matters, it's the ability to translate that into job prospects, into careers, and having those industry benchmarks is really critical. I know, Kian, you spent a lot of time thinking about it. You were on the founding team at DLAI, and now you've created Workera. Could you speak a little bit more about sort of that approach?
Yeah, it echoes what Fernando just said. I think HR folks are drowning in content. Content is not anymore the limiting factor. You have so many courses out there of great quality. So the question is really, how do you get started, and who do you send through what curriculum? Creating careers is one step, but even understanding what the organization looks like. Oftentimes, in order to be a high functioning AI organization, you need this set of highly technical AI folks, which people would call machine learning engineers and data scientists and software engineers, who are here to make sure that the AI projects are deployed into production, made available to users, and scales properly. But there's also another aspect to look at. It echoes what Amirali also talked about, which is data literacy, company-wide, all functions. I'm actually curious, if any of the leaders around the table have an idea of how many times the word supervised learning is being said every day within the company, and it's probably much more than before. And so what does that mean? It means when you're a recruiter in a company that suddenly is using so much vocabulary around AI, you need to start getting to know this vocabulary. If you're starting to recruit data scientists and machine learning engineers, you need to be speaking their language. If you're a product manager who was used to working with backend and front end and infra, and now you're working with AI systems, it's a completely different deal. And similarly, if you're an executive, you're asked today to identify new business models that rely on AI models. And so all of that is part of a company-wide data literacy that HR folks are trying to drive.
Can I make a quick point on that one before I forget it, because I'm a bit of a dummy? Here's one of my pet hates, and I don't know if you guys share it as well, which is a lot of our leaders are illiterate in AI. It's okay, we're gentle to our leaders, we love our leaders. But when they learn by examples. And this is a problem. We need to, in HR, push your leaders, and I think, Amirali, I think you said it as well. Our leaders need to understand enough about the science to really understand their own problems, not take even more examples from the industry and validate, to your point, on the hype, and listen to the hype of another CEO that's told them they should be doing that thing. I don't know if it's useful to you or not, but they need to be doing it. It's really important that our leaders also become well educated to the point where they understand enough to understand the concepts and come up with their own use cases and drive AI from the top with use cases that are relevant to them, not just the other example they've heard or they've read, which just seems to make the rounds in industry over and over again.
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic point. And actually, Valerie, as someone who started off with a different subject matter expertise, you were a life science engineer, you did a certain amount of sales in the field, and now you're director of data and analytics. You've made that transition, right? You've picked up the AI literacy. You've acquired the knowledge, not just at the example level, but at the true literacy level. I'd love if you could share a little bit about your journey. Oh, you're on mute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, but could you increase your volume a little bit?
Sorry, I'm just going back to the laptop because it's
No
difficult.
worries.
I was trying to join from the phone, but you know, with the connection issues, but it doesn't really work. So anyway, yeah, that's thank you for the question. That's a nice question actually. So I mean, couple of reflections from my side. We already said that you know, data, when you're a subject matter expert, data is the basic thing to know, right? If you want to transition to AI, to an AI career, we already said that. So the data understanding, the business roles, you know, starting with descriptive analytics, KPI understanding, KPI tracking, and all that can be a good bridge towards more advanced analytics.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first point. The second thing, you know, is I believe that a scientific background is also required. I already talked about statistics, or is better, maybe not required, but at least is better. And so an engineering background, you know, if I think about my own case, my studies, let's say I studied life science engineering and I studied statistics. That was not my favorite topic at that time, to be honest, but you know, it takes time to connect the dots, right? At school, you might not see it. When you're studying, you might not see it as and it's possible to refresh, you know, once our own, you know, statistics, knowledge of statistics, of course, we can, you know, nowadays we can take courses, you know, the whole life. And I think, you know, I'm a big believer of lifelong learning. So I think, you know, one should not be scared. I think it's good to have a foundation, a solid scientific foundation, and we can always refresh, you know, our knowledge of statistics if we're just talking about statistics. And then finally, again, taking my own example, my own experience, let's say, is, you know, I studied life sciences, as I said, and what I really liked in life sciences is the complexity and ever evolving, you know, through research, we always learn more. And I see a parallel there with, you know, with AI. Actually, we always learn more. We always, you know, we can learn every day actually on AI. I was really passionate at school. I mean, during my studies, right, at the university, I would say in France it would be school, but the equivalent would be university in the US. And I was really passionate when a teacher said, well, this question, actually, we don't know the answer yet because nobody has discovered it yet, yeah, in biology, for example. And I think this is where I see the parallel. That was really awesome for me to be, you know, to think that I was really learning the cutting edge things, you know, in biology. Well, now it's the same thing in AI to a certain extent. We can always go deeper. And I think that, you know, somehow, you know, to manage this level of complexity, we need to have a helicopter view, and we need to have some kind of intuition of, okay, what kind of technique can I use to solve this problem, to hack this problem? That's a bit, you know, what passionates me in both domains and how it comes together.
No, that's completely spot on. And I think it's actually really interesting. You know, you were presented an opportunity that helped you really realize that, hey, like this is what I need to do in order to sort of move my career forward, is, you know, pursuing this sort of knowledge, you know, whether that's a refresh on stats or, you know, learning new AI literacy. Kian, I'd love to ask you a little bit about, you know, how can other people know that they're at that fulcrum? Like who should be considering AI plus X careers? How do they know if they're ready or qualified to start?
Yeah, well, I think everything starts with a self-assessment, understanding what's your strength, what's your weaknesses, and you can do that on
Workera has those types of assessments, yes, for the beginner.
Yes. So all levels, we actually build computerized adaptive tests, so everybody can come and take it. It's going to adapt to their level. I would say important to tie it to your work. So once you've uncovered your strengths and weaknesses, try to be very selective on what you study, in what order you study it, and diversify the number of sources. It's very common for people to jump on a course just because they find it online randomly, but actually following a quality curriculum is a game changer, and diversifying the sources is also very important. If they can tie that learning to their work, it's even more exciting. First, because they're going to be motivated to learn, and also because it's good for the world. If you're an expert in a certain domain and you have access to a proprietary data set that nobody else in the world may have access to, you are actually producing work that is quite unique, and that's really good for the world. Yeah. So, yeah.
No, that's fantastic. I know one of the fundamentals around Workera's creation was that, like quality, you want to help students find the most quality content. And so I know you guys have spent a lot of effort in trying to be platform agnostic. And so whether it's a deep learning course or something else, you've really put a lot of thought into making sure that you're finding the right material to teach the right subject, so that, people don't have to kind of do that process themselves. Obviously a big fan of what you guys are doing. Now, we talked a little bit about how people can know if they're ready to start that AI literacy journey. Amirali, I'd love to know, for the AI practitioners, how do they decide what domain to pursue? Like, let's say there's someone who's, specialized, spend a lot of time learning in, that super expert in AI. How do they pick a domain, and quite frankly, how much domain knowledge do you think in a specific field does one need in order to be able to apply AI in that field?
Yeah, that's a very, very important question. And the very easy, or maybe a little bit of cliche answer that I want to give is that, first of all, I don't think this happens these days that much, that you're just an AI expert, like you're a purely AI expert and you know nothing about anything else, right? So if that is happening, then sure. But usually you have some sort of a connection to something, right? But let's assume that you're an AI expert and you want to see which domain to go in. I would say go to a domain that you feel more passionate about. And this goes back to a little conversation that we had in the past. There is, like, when I'm hiring, I have to decide whether I want to hire an AI person and teach them biology, or hire a biology person and teach them AI. And each one of them has its own challenges. If you hire a biology person to teach them AI, it's not just AI, it's coding, and coding comes with years of practice. It's not like you just take a course and now you know how to code, right? And
it's not even just building the code, it's figuring out how to scale it and really put
exactly. Especially if you want to grow in that career path. Like you can take care of some little things, but then your path is very limited. So that has its own challenges. But let's look at the other way around. So you are an AI expert, and you come in and I say that, okay, I'm going to give you a problem and you're going to learn the biology around it. And for the longest time, I thought that this is a better way. Now I don't really think there is a better way or worse way. But in this particular case, whoever is going to do that, they have to really commit to this. Like, you cannot get away with, oh, I'm going to read a little bit about the biology and jump on the data. You have to really understand the problem that you're solving. And if there is no passion for you there, you're going to fall short. And it shows itself as you try to grow within the company in your career. It immediately shows itself.
No, that makes a ton of sense. And Fernando, I actually think this goes back to what you were saying before about the density of the problem, and whether it's more in the domain expertise area or whether it's more in the AI side. I know that Accenture has a slightly different model than what Amirali has described. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. And if you can imagine, we hire very curious people. It's part of the consulting life. The people want variety and want excitement. So a lot of it comes with that. So for us, and we do have pure AI experts. We happen to have people who just, mathematicians who just care about the mathematics of the model, God bless them. But more often than not, what we do is we hire people in scientific degrees. And quite frankly, and I think, Kian, you said it, if you studied, I was an electronic engineer, probably the worst electronic engineer on the planet, but that was my background. But I was very good at the mathematics of data, and that worked for me. So we hire a lot of people that have that scientific background. It's unlikely that you're not going to have an interest in the, I think, Amirali, you said it, unlikely they're not going to have a trend towards, or in their life, find information and information problems. It's totally unlikely. So then we expose them to different industries. And now what we don't want is what I call the specialist generalist tourist problem, which is we don't need the super specialist that only can ever work in in a valve. The generalist that kind of dabbles in everything, and we certainly don't want a tourist, which is somebody that can create a model, doesn't understand it, but can do the coding online, and you got your model, and then when it goes wrong, he or she doesn't understand it, right? So what we try to do is we foster the core skills, and then we expose them to different industries. And what we're trying to find, I think, is what Amirali you were referring to, is that passion. Is they hang on to a passion. They see, they experience a lot of industries, and every time they will catch on to one. There'll be one where suddenly, because I don't know if you guys feel this, but the more you're exposed to something, it's very difficult if you're a data curious person that you don't build a passion. I mean, I challenge anybody to not sit in front of, say, a turbine, start seeing numbers flow and figure out whether it goes faster and slower, or whether you're going to break it or not. That you don't sit there pressing buttons to see what you can achieve with it. It's a natural thing for engineers, right? So I think that's the key word, engineers. It turns mathematicians and scientists into having that engineer curiosity mind, and we just focus them on a few industries until they pick one that they love. And at that point, you start creating the specialist. You start creating the AIX plus, and it grows and it grows, and they grow on both sides of the knowledge. They're exposed to the industry, and they're exposed to the science, and they grow and grow and grow. And every time trying to walk away from what I don't want is a super expert that comes in, does a 25-minute course somewhere, and they're now an AI tourist. Okay, AI tourists, not so useful. Specialists, over time, good. If they end up becoming generalists because they become very senior and they start exposing themselves to even more breadth, like Amirali, I'm sure you're an amazing specialist, but also an amazing generalist in your knowledge generally of the space. That's ideally what you want. You become generalist through specialization. That's, for me, is the best. And that's what we try to engender. Specialized to then generalize.
T-shaped individuals.
No, that's really fascinating. Kian, I know we've we've had conversations about how the path of an MLE and that traditional sort of route is different from AI plus X, and Fernando's proposed here sort of the specialist to generalist pathway. How would you recommend folks to start? Any resources, any guidance that you'd provide for that?
So the difference between MLEs and AI plus X, to me, when I look at the market, my interpretation is that MLEs look more and more like software engineers who have a depth in data and AI. And they make great teammates with AI plus X individuals by helping them make their models available to a wider audience. So I see lots of job descriptions that are too demanding. Companies ask applicants to be subject matter experts, to be scientists, to be engineers at the same time. But the reality is that it's very rare to find this combination of skills. And as Fernando describes, it takes years and years to build all that skill set. And so I think it's important for the practitioner and for the companies to know the difference and how to build these pods that are going to be successful within the company. Take an AI plus X individual, combine them with a machine learning engineer that can make their work available to a wider audience, or take a software engineer and combine them with an AI plus X individual who can explain them all the details and nitty-gritty details of what it means to deploy an AI system in a specific environment.
Awesome. I have a point on that, actually, if my connection is still good. So we've been looking at a new concept, let's say analytics engineers. I don't know if that's talking to you, but we've been looking at not just AI plus X individuals, which would be kind of data science plus subject matter expert, but also the combination of data engineer plus subject matter expert. Without the data science piece, without the maybe statistics piece, for example, right? So more someone who would be able to build a data pipeline and to build visualizations, but not necessarily to build algorithms on the data. So we've been looking at that, and actually it's also very hard to find, because I don't know if this concept is shared. So we've read that, you know, in different places, but it's not something that is well known. So I'd be happy to hear your thoughts on that.
I think the category is not, the job category of AI is not figured out yet. Meaning when you look at software, you know what a front-end engineer is, what a back-end engineer is, what a mobile engineer is, what a security engineer is. You can differentiate all that. But in AI, it's still quite scattered. And when my team at Workera worked with more than 100 AI companies to understand exactly what are the tasks that make up the AI project, what are the skills needed, and what are the roles that carry out those tasks, we saw really 5 or 6 roles emerging, and data engineer / software engineer in charge of data engineering and AI infrastructure was one of them. But I have to say, I have not seen this combination of a strong data engineering skills along with business analysis capacities, less so than I would think.
Makes sense.
I was going to say, we've seen a bit of that, if it's helpful, a little bit of that. And it's mostly in large companies where you have quite a lot of people that understand the data because they've been exposed to it for years, and they're in finance, for example. And they really do understand the data, and they've been working in their SAP system forever, and they know all the tables, and they know how to plug it out. And actually, they don't need to create algorithms. They can create amazing visualizations. They can do the mathematics that they need and the statistics that they need. And frankly, they do an amazing job. Kian, I'm with you. It's difficult to define it, but if you're in a large company, you will have these people, you will need these people, and you don't need to train them on AI. You need to give them better tools to do things quicker. You need to give them all these other things, and they'll be super productive. So you're certainly not mad. You're totally correct. On the ML engineering thing, I have a simple definition of ML engineering, which is helping me lately, which is, and by the way, it's one of my favorite careers. It is the performance and scalability engineering of models. That's it. Performance and scalability engineering of models. And given that we get a lot of people with a lot of enthusiasm from creating models, and many of us are going to create absolute monsters, some of these folks are going to help us from ourselves. So if you go back to my little story about the 5 software engineers that sat in the room and created their little thing and came out and they're all organized, now we're going to put five data scientists. And after 5 hours, you're going to come out, and they haven't spoken to each other. They've created 5 models. They're spectacular. They're beautiful models, written in 5 different languages or mathematical approaches, right? So the thing is, there's an ML engineer and a set of ML engineers walking from that room to the next room with the engineers, the software engineers. There's an ML engineer going backwards and forwards saying, right, hold on, I'm going to organize you, and I'm going to organize you, and I'm going to make this work, and I'm going to make this scale, and and there's so many packages in the market that these people need to have, Kian, you'll excuse my technical term, they have to be mega geeky in the sense of all the software products out there, because it's crazy. They have to be able to talk to data scientists, and there's a science to that. They have to talk to data scientists in a way that we're all understanding each other. And they have to understand the merits of how data at scale works. We need 5 of these people per data scientist in the world if we're gonna survive. 5 to 1, and I'm getting it wrong. So even though this definition is simple, it's performance and scaling of models, they are going to play a key role, and I think it's going to be one of the key careers in the next 5 years. That's my bet.
Yeah, that's a really.
I just add one thing. It seems that so one way we organize the assessment in Workera is to try to help people uncover as many skills as possible within an MLE career, say. And what I'm hearing here is we there are the methodologies, the part that are completely tooling agnostic. You need to understand the models, how they work, and so on. Then you have a set of tools. And I know, Amirali, you may confirm in genomics, you have a set of tools that are specific to genomics. And in pharma, you will have a set of tools that is specific to pharma. And those can be picked up if the person has the right methods. And then you have the subject matter expertise, which is also something else. And so you have so many different groups of competencies to evaluate that people need to be more aware of what they need, and not only focus on tooling or only focus on methodologies or only focus on subject matter expertise, but have the right distribution of skills across all three areas.
So actually, let me also put another point of view here. There is modeling part, and modeling part can be a very broad term. I can create a model to help another person in the company to create something better. Like in Illumina, we have the enzyme engineering group, and I can create a model to help them to re-engineer an enzyme. Right? But then there is another level of modeling that your model becomes a product. Right? You're offering that model to the world. And when that comes in place, you have to treat that model as a product, and requires a lot of engineers around it, a lot of support, a lot of engineering. And that is where the machine learning engineers come in place. If you don't have that infrastructure, you cannot go far.
Oh, really solid points all around. So we've been chatting amongst ourselves for some time now. So we're going to open up to some questions that we're seeing in the Slido. So the first one is the biggest challenge seems to be the transition. So how do you transition from, you know, a non-AI role to an AI or machine learning linked role?
Maybe I can start on that one, because we also have had a brief discussion about it, an internal question. You have to read the situation and see where you are within the company. And that is really important. If you are the CEO of a company, that is another approach. You decide to move your company towards becoming AI enabled, you create all the infrastructure. But what if, and I think that this would be the case for many of our audience here, what if you are a scientist, an expert in a particular matter, in a particular subject in the company, and suddenly you want to add AI to your portfolio of skills that you have? Yeah, you want to make sure that this goes far. Like, you don't want to just add AI to be able to take care of a little analysis that you wanted to do. And for that, you have to work it out with the rest of the company. Make sure that all the little pieces, all the little elements are there. For example, if you're within research and you are working on something, some really great model, and the whole research organization is behind you. But then the vision is that this model would become a product, but the buy-in is not on the product development end. It's not going to go far. So you have to create those conversations. You have to go through the right channels within your company to do that. And is it easy? No. Is there a general recipe that one can offer? No, you are within your company. Smaller companies have their own dynamics, larger companies have their own dynamics, but you have to make sure that you go after these elements. If you don't go after these elements, your journey in terms of AI plus X may become a very short journey that doesn't live for long.
Oh, fantastic. So thank you, Amirali. So our next question is, how can one prove their knowledge in AI if they have a different professional background? Kian, this seems like something that you're working on.
Yeah, I mean, an assessment is one way to do so. And I think, more and more people are sharing their performance certificates online, showing what they're good at, and also be very open about what they don't know. I think it's fine. We know not everyone is, it's almost impossible to be good at everything. And so, be open to that idea, both as a hiring manager and also as a practitioner. I think that another way is really to apply it to projects and show their projects. I talked earlier about the fact that if you're a subject matter expert, you probably have niche information, niche data that only you has access to or knowledge of. And if you can produce a good work around a problem that is specific to that and that you're passionate about, that's going to stand out, and you can show that you are eager to learn and are on the path to grow as an AI practitioner.
Oh, fantastic point. So our next question is, a lot of, I believe all of us are in countries that are relatively developed, but how can folks who are doing research in developing countries where there are limited resources, such as poor connection, power fluctuations, GPU facilities, budget, what advice do you have for folks trying to create AI plus X careers there?
I can make a quick comment on this, that there are different types of AI. When we talk about AI, it's not always an AI model that requires like many GPU nodes and lots of data. You can do AI with small data. You can do great AI with your own laptop if you know what to look for and what angle to approach, which goes back to what Kian was saying, that if you are the subject matter expert, you know the niche part that you can attack the problem. So keep your eyes open and focus on the problem, focus on your subject expertise, and the path would start to become clear for you.
Can I come into that one quickly, Sandhya? This one fascinates me. I'm Spanish and I live in Cambridge in the UK, so I certainly can't claim that I lived through that experience. But one of the things about AI is that you can get lost in toys, you can get lost in tools, you can get lost in platforms. As Amirali says, it's much more. If you don't have access to all those, it might be a good thing for you to focus on the depth of some of this. To truly understand what a neural net is actually doing is a marvelous thing. And I will challenge that many people learn deep learning and don't quite understand exactly what's going on. And I always joke that we only know what's going on when it's going wrong, and now we have to take it apart and figure it out because that's how it works. So maybe take the opportunity to dive a little bit deeper into the depths of how these things work. Spend the time. The tools can be a distraction. I do see a lot of people that want to play around with them and they're creating all sorts of monsters. And my favorite people that are learning are those that stick to less of the toys, but really dive deep in understanding what's actually happening here. And I always have the challenge. By the way, I don't know if you use this challenge. I have a challenge to people that are learning to explain to me what a probability distribution is, like I'm a 5-year-old. Just explain to me like I'm a 5-year-old. And when they've mastered an example, then I steal that example and I use it next, and so on and so forth. Focus on those things. It'll work out for you.
No, makes sense. Valerie, I know you were working on trying to do this yourself a little bit. Could you chat, perhaps give us a little taste of that?
Well, yeah, I mean, when I joined J&J, I mean, there were a lot of expectations in terms of upskilling the people in other functions. I mean, in my team, but also in connected functions within the commercial organization. There are still, by the way, it's not over yet. But when I joined, I mean, I immediately noticed that people were asking me, how can we train our people to become analytics translators? And the previous approach on that had been to develop, we could say, an in-house content, right? So kind of a tailored content, like a training, an online training, and in-person training at that time also. Now it's not possible anymore, but in-person training on 2-3 days as well. And of course, with COVID, we had any way to reshape that. So I took the opportunity, let's say, to rethink what we really need, right? Because I think there is so much content out there that we don't need to reinvent the wheel. That's a bit, the underlying thinking that I had, and that there is so much content, deep content on the topics. Now the difficulty is, what exactly do I need to train on, and how what's missing, let's say, in my profile, in my skills. And so that's why I was looking for an assessment, and I was looking to build, these kind of assessments ourselves manually. And I was thinking, how can we build this pathway? So we started even to map, to create some levels of analytics translators, and then to map some content on Coursera as an example.
Mhm.
But then it's really a huge amount of work. I mean, it's really, it will never be perfect. And the challenge also that I see is that you need to really connect it to the job of the people, right? You can't just, send people study a whole specialization on Coursera if they don't connect it to their daily job. So I think that's the challenge we still need to tackle. We still need to figure out how we will connect it, how we'll make sure it will be closely connected to their daily work, and that they can really use what they have learned immediately before they forget about it. So, and that was that I mean, your question is highly relevant. That was at the time that I met Kian. Actually, I talked to him and I described what I was trying to do, and then he said, like, you're trying to do manually what we are doing. So that's how we connected, and how we said, well, maybe let's look at that and see if we can benefit from this type of solution.
No, that's fantastic. So next question we have are, what are industries you foresee as being disrupted by AI or deep learning in the next decade? Amirali.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Not very easy to answer, of course, but there are certain indications that you can follow. Go for industries, or look at industries that are generating a lot of data. Data is the most basic thing. If you don't have data, you don't have AI. So if the industry is generating a lot of data, then that's an industry that is going to be disrupted by AI in the near future. One example is the industry that I'm involved in, which is genomics and DNA sequencing and healthcare. A lot of data is being generated. And the other way that you can look at it is industries that require multiple data types to work with each other. As soon as you have to deal with multiple data types, now finding patterns is not as trivial for a human being just to comprehend data types and try to pick up a pattern and be very, very efficient in that. So that's another type of industries that AI would disrupt. One example could be, for example, advertisement industries. I mean, I don't have a magic ball here. Everybody knows that AI is disrupting that industries, but there are different data types that are coming in and you have to make connections. The same is for genomics and multi-omics, multiple data types, EMR of a patient, different sequencing data that you can get from that patient that are all coming in, and you have to make the pattern. And in general, any industry that or a problem associated with the industry that requires you to extract complex patterns, that is an industry that is starving for AI to come in. Now, some industries require complex patterns, but they are not yet there to generate enough data. But the ones that are generating enough data are the ones that you have to have a lookout for, or actually initiate something in there. And maybe one quick comment, which goes back to the subject expert matters here. If you're just an AI person and you don't have access to data, or you cannot generate your own data, you are in a very vulnerable position. So make sure, and that's a benefit, that's the advantage that subject experts have, that you can control data flow. So if you can create data, now add AI on top of that, and you're golden. But if you just want to be an AI person, but now you have to go here and there and try to find data to work with, you're always in a vulnerable position.
Can I come in on this one for a bit of fun and a different view? God, 10-year window. You made it easy for us. Everything is going to be disrupted. This is an easy one. I mean, you might as well made it 20 years. And for a simple reason, you can do I do an experiment every now and then, which drives my family to lunacy, which is I'll spend a whole day from the moment I wake up to the moment I go to bed, writing in a little piece of paper when AI hasn't been involved in my life. All day. It's a very long list, and it's getting long. I've been doing it for years. It's getting longer and longer and longer and longer. It is incredible how much AI is around in our lives. For every company, for everything you do, from your laptop to the apps to the car it's ridiculous. So if you just extrapolate that, and that is companies that affect our life now that you can see and feel, right? Then if you can extrapolate that in 10 years, everybody's going to be affected. But we don't have to buy into hype. We're all going to be affected because, to be honest, like any cycle of technology, it becomes more prevalent, more prevalent, more prevalent, more prevalent, more prevalent. But we also have to remind ourselves, in the last 2 years, with things like GPT-3 and transformers and things like that, the world of just analysis of text has moved quicker than in the last 20 years. Mm-hmm. So then when you give yourself a window of 10 years, you can just make it up. How many spikes are you going to see that are going to be like that are going to change the way we do things? Mm-hmm. So it makes it fairly easy to think that in 20 years, given all of us are going to, the education is going to be much higher, we're all going to be using it. We're all going to be doing the Fernando test every day and checking the eye. I challenge some listeners to send me theirs. Then it's easy to think that it's going to change a lot of what we do. But we don't have to get philosophical about massive change. You'll just change in a way that it's going to happen little by little, and we won't recognize it. Like we don't recognize. I mean, can you remember, guys, still remember the time when we didn't have a mobile phone? I remember it. Yeah. It's hard, but I can remember it. That was for many 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So that's why I'm saying you give yourself 10-year window. It's an easy one. All of it, absolutely all of it.
That's fair. Then I would ask you guys sort of the flip side of the question then. So you're obviously well versed in this area and you're saying AI is inevitable. Everything we do is going to touch AI in some capacity. How do you talk to, say, a skeptical boss or supervisor to say, hey, we should be utilizing AI in our work, and then they're not sold on it? How do you tackle that?
I can talk about that. I'm laughing because it happens at work actually when I think it's all about educating your supervisor or your boss, and you need to hammer it. So I'm laughing because some of my teammates, when they want me to think about something that I'm not knowledgeable about, they're going to go on Slack, they're going to create a channel, and they're going to post every day an article about the market that I need to look at. And they're going to tell me you have to look at this article every day. And the result is that 3 weeks later, after reading 30 articles on that topic, I become much more knowledgeable and I see their points and I start seeing the value. And so I think it's really about educating, hammering, and it's going to go through. If there is value, it's going to go through.
Okay.
Yeah, the other point that I want to make is that first, data speaks for itself, right? So if the legacy model in a certain field was achieving, I don't know, like 20% accuracy, and now you have an AI model that is doing it like 90%, you have a very easy conversation with that person, with your boss or whoever else. But the other thing is that also try to understand their needs. And sometimes we overlook that. Let's say you are a person within research and you're trying to come up with an idea, applying model, but then you're talking to somebody that needs to create a product out of it and support it. And they have too many concerns, like is it stable? What if a new data set comes in and it fails? So you have to listen to their concerns and see why they are not believing in this, and then address those concerns. Because if you don't want to do that and just keep saying what you're saying, it's not going to go far. You have to understand their point of view as well.
No, that makes sense. So we've talked about, difficult bosses, but also, there are industries that just lack the large amount of data that, is generally perceived to be necessary when working with AI problems. So how do we work in those industries when we don't have like tech standards of, we don't have, billions of parameters to work with?
I can come in if it helps, because we see it a lot. So one of the things that I think is going to evolve in the next few years is synthetic data. And I mean proper synthetic data. We're not going to define it here, but something not just obfuscation of data, right? Why do I think that? Because notwithstanding Amirali's point on data being key and niche data sets, all that is totally true, totally correct. But there is a need for data that we can play with, for faster ways to model, even within companies, by the way, using data that is, got private information and is protected. We still need that to play and evolve and create. And we see a lot of that, Sandhya. Lots of customers who are even incapable of using their own data, even though it's theirs, they're incapable of using it in a way that's usable. So I think the synthetic world is gonna move a lot. And we're going to start seeing more and more an economy of synthetic data coming around, sitting about, and people sharing. Can you imagine if during COVID, we'd actually had changed, like we should have, shared data in a way that we had all the patterns, all the ways to analyze the problem, but none of the problems with PI? We would have been better for it as a society, right? As a human society. So I think synthetic is going to really help. It's going to create its own economy of problems, which is a different story. But you're obviously not going to suddenly create data out of nothingness, though. But it will create more and more the ability to model on more and more problems that maybe you don't personally happen to have the data, right? It'll make it more easily available to anybody in a way that you can do some good. That was my thinking.
Actually, let me make also a comment here, which relates to, again, subject matter experts. If you see a problem, of not having enough data, there is the opportunity for you, right? There is the flip side of it is just try to find a way to generate a lot of data and develop a new technology. You don't have to be an AI expert, right? That's one way of going it, but another way is that, if I can generate data, then I'm sitting on the gold mine. I can hire AI experts. I can become an AI expert. I can move industry in a certain direction. Just look at it that way. Don't sit around and be sad about the fact that there is not much data. There is the opportunity. Go for it.
Yeah, from my perspective, I mean, there is of course data quantity, but there is also data quality questions. And in our area of commercial analytics in pharma, I don't know if we can talk about big data. Actually, in certain cases, like patient data, yes, for sure. In terms of quantity, it might not be impressive in certain cases, but in terms of variety, in terms of also data quality issues that we actually need to solve when we want to evolve towards more advanced analytics. Yeah, there is a challenge there along the way, and we need to constantly improve, data quality, and in our case, it's as important as the quantity of data that we have, if not more.
Awesome. Really solid points. Thank you all. And so now we're going to move on to our very last question, which is, we've talked a little bit about all this sort of stumbling blocks as we try to create AI plus X careers. But how do we, rather than, perhaps pushing against the tide, how can we find companies that are eager to create these career paths in AI? The question comes and says, it seems like we need to first join a company that invests in your career, and that's mostly not the case. I know, Kian, you work with a number of companies that are focused in this area. I'd love if you could round us out.
So you're asking how we can find companies that are forward thinking in terms of AI careers? Is that the question?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think to Fernando's point, it's going to happen in all industries. So, you have to find a problem that you're passionate about first. Don't look for the technology, look for the problem. If you're really passionate about the problem and AI is not the solution to the problem, then never mind. if you're passionate about the problem and the problem is very difficult and it's generating a ton of data, I think you will have the opportunity to bring AI to that organization. If they have it, even better. But even if they don't have the AI maturity, you can play a big role in bringing that. And I'm talking with startups in mind as much as large corporations. But I think there are amazing organizations out there. People are investing a lot more in AI talent, both to nurture internal AI talent and to bring new competencies in-house. The market is going to continue to grow. I think remote work and the rise of remote work has opened up opportunities from people around the world to work on local, but also now global projects. And I think I'm personally very excited of what the world will be in 2-3 years from now, and how many AI hubs there's going to be around the world, rather than, people talk about Silicon Valley, people talk about Montreal. I think that there is room for, and of course London, but there is room for many more AI hubs around the world, and I think it's going to happen in the next few years.
Awesome.
Can I drop something in quickly on that one, because I think it's good fun. Think about it this way: every company out there has an AI career waiting to happen. Just make it yours. Every company is going to need AI, if it's small, if it's big, if it's creative, if it's not. Make it your opportunity if you're passionate about the topic that they work in. You don't need to go to a big company like mine that has a career track and it gives you certainty. Maybe a little bit of uncertainty means that you're more successful. You're the creator. You're the first. You're the leader. So inspire yourself by the topic of the company, and be the innovator, be the AI innovator. Why not? Maybe that's another way.
Yeah, and actually, let me build upon that what Fernando said. I mean, long term, all companies are going to have AI one way or another. I agree with both Fernando and Kian. Right now, if you're looking for a position right now, there are a few quick answers. If the company doesn't have any job openings regarding AI, well, they're not doing it, right? So that's a very easy question. The question is that if they have an AI opening, now you have to probe with the right questions. Like, is it a very well thought activity within that company, or is it a very short-sighted activity? You don't want to join a company that they're just opening a couple of AI positions and they're thinking that they're going to revolutionize the whole industry. Just ask the right questions and make sure that you have the right career path in there. Going back to Fernando's question, if they don't have any openings, that's your opportunity exactly. For entry level, it is harder, but if you're joining that company as a higher up level, start the conversation. There you go. There is your opportunity to create an AI activity within that company.
So from my side, if you are a subject matter expert in a company, you're already working for this company, I would say, and you want to transition towards AI plus X, an AI plus X role, then I would say, then just give it a go. I mean, maybe you need an assessment, maybe not, but just start learning. Let's say start, reading a lot of also articles, and start really immersing yourself into the topic. Start diving into the topic in a sense, right? And take a course, an online course or something, so that you can upskill, start to upskill before you actually apply to a position which is more ideally within your own company, because it's not easy if you're not trained in AI to change to another company, right? And you have never been working on that before. So I would really do it, in that case, in your own company, but you need to give it a go, and you need to not to be afraid to take courses on your own, even, to invest your personal time in a sense, right? So that's for me the first step. And then you build on that, and then you can take, an assignment or a role, which, allows you to use these skills, and then you can build your experience.
Yeah, makes total sense. Yeah, at Deep Learning AI, we really believe in that sort of that value of lifelong learning. And it's lovely to see that all of you guys feel strongly about that as well. And with that, Thank you all for the very insightful and riveting discussion. I'm sorry we went a little over time, but it was really wonderful to hear all of your perspectives. Thank you, speakers, for joining us today. This brings us to the end of today's event. We hope that our audience has enjoyed today's event. We're going to send a follow-up email with a survey for all of our attendees today. We'd love to hear about how we make our future events better. And we're also giving out a 50% discount code for any of our online courses to up to 200 people who submit qualifying responses. So keep an eye out, make sure to send in your feedback. And thanks again to Workera for letting us borrow their CEO and their support for today's event. If you're a business leader wanting to get your company AI ready, Workera is hosting a series of events with AI plus X leaders like Amir, Valerie, and Fernando over the coming months. So if you don't want to miss out these future events, sign up via the link in the description box below. And don't worry, if you can't make a live event, you can always find the recordings on our YouTube channel or theirs. We hope you walk away today feeling inspired about your next career step. We look forward to seeing you next time. And as always, keep learning.